What's up, Rivalers, and welcome to our first official tier list for Marvel Rivals. Now that the game is live and ranked mode has been out for a few days, this video is going to give you a general gist of the meta and an idea of which characters to play and avoid if you want to climb. Now, reminder, every character is strong in a vacuum, every hero absolutely can and has carried games, but this tier list is purely for people who want to min-max and optimize their climb. Please don't take this tier list as gospel or get discouraged from playing your favorite hero if you see them low on the list. I highly encourage everyone to play the characters they find fun, as we are still extremely early in Marvel Rivals lifecycle. Seriously, every character can feel OP, but some are just a little more OP in more situations than others. So this video will serve as a cheat sheet to understand the game a little bit better and to know which characters are really excelling in the game right now. So we're just going to start off in the bottom tier. This is D tier. Now, as much as I hate to say it, Wolverine is genuinely just the weakest hero in the game. It feels like almost everyone agrees about it. He's a melee rushdown character that can rarely actually get those KOs before going down himself. He's unreliable as a duelist, so you have to play him in a really risky playstyle with much less reward than the other melee characters. If you like the playstyle of getting in their faces and just shredding them, you may as well just be playing Iron Fist. He's so much better at doing the same thing. And I feel the same way about Logan's partner in D tier, which is going to be Black Widow. It's funny because everyone was convinced this character was going to absolutely break the game, but it turns out headshots don't even KO on this character, and they're extremely hard to land in a game that moves as fast as Marvel Rivals. Black Widow really is just for having fun, and she's just straight up outclassed by the other snipers, which you will see much further up the list. Now moving into C tier, these are heroes that you absolutely can climb with. All of these characters can solo carry games, but their road to doing so is a little more difficult. Now these characters aren't awful, but they're performing a little below average. So first up is Iron Man. This character can really take over lobbies and lower skill brackets, but he's definitely outclassed in higher elo games. His damage is great, but just the fact that he's so slow in the air and he roots himself for his ultimate, it makes him a really easy target for snipers and even melee rushdown characters. It can be really hard to find a position as Iron Man to just freely shoot without getting swatted out of the air, compared to some of the other duelists who can still match his damage without the unnecessary positional risk. Now up next in C tier is Hulk, who I feel like has really gotten the short end of the stick on this release patch. His ability to disrupt enemy backlines is good when it works, but his hitbox is huge, which makes him an easy target to just continuously stunlock. And his transformation gimmick really just works against him, because when you're Banner, you're useless. And when you're transforming from Hulk back into Banner, the timing is just so brutal. Everyone just sits there waiting for you to be vulnerable and pops you every time. Which means that once you've gotten knocked out of your Hulk form, you're basically already dead, but you have to wait an additional 5 seconds. It just feels like you have an extra long death timer. I would definitely prefer to have any tank on my team compared to Hulk at the current moment, but I know a lot of people really enjoy this character's gameplay, so I do hope they buff him soon. Now up next are the melee characters Black Panther and Magic. Now with melee characters, it's just so hard to compete with the ranged characters in a hero shooter game. Not only are heroes like Black Panther hard to pilot, they're hard to do the bare minimum with compared to pretty much every ranged hero who has similar time to kill but can do it from several screens away and without any of these fancy mechanics. Playing Black Panther definitely feels like you're playing against yourself. You're just making your own life harder. Now, it is very rewarding once you finally land that reset combo and take someone out, but he's just so unreliable, and I think you'll see that as a trend with a lot of these melee characters. You absolutely can get these clean pop-off plays after hours of practicing the characters, and it feels so good, but you're definitely fighting an uphill battle. Now up next in C tier is Namor and Storm. These characters are decent in certain situations. For instance, Namor is definitely a better character to play on defense maps, allowing him to set up his turrets, but on open control areas and when playing offense, it's really hard to find value on this character since you're forced to push into a team that's already set up. And Storm has the same weaknesses as Iron Man, as a very slow flyer. Her damage can't really match much of anything, and she does make up for it a little bit with the passive utility she brings to her team, but outside of her ultimate, it is downright hard to get KOs as Storm. Now moving on to B tier, these characters are what I would call average within their class. Definitely not the best, but absolutely playable. Probably not ideal picks to lock in every game, but they can be picked into specific maps, comps, or matchups. So first up are the healers Loki and Jeff. Now Loki likely has the highest skill ceiling of any strategist in the game, but when it comes to healers, all that really matters right now is their ultimates. The higher tiered healers that you'll see on this list, they'll pop their ultimates and their entire team just basically becomes immortal for long periods of time. Now Loki's ultimate lets him pick and choose the right ult for whatever scenario, but usually this means he's taking an offensive ult to try and get a pick with. with. And during that ult, he's actually leaving his team down a healer, which is just not ideal. His lanterns are a great anti-dive and pick tool, and are probably the best thing he brings to the table, but purely operating as a healer, he can't really match the healing output of anyone on this list. Still good, definitely still playable, and I feel the same way about Jeff. Now, we've all seen the hilarious Jeff 5-man ults where he scoops an entire team and throws them off the map, but this character is basically one big walking head, and he's just such a vulnerable target for snipers compared to the higher tiered supports. His healing is great, but it feels like Jeff just has a much harder time staying alive to the better picks. Now onto the duelist and B tier, we've got Spider-Man, Iron Fist, Scarlet Witch, Star-Lord, and Bucky. All these characters feel fantastic in winning games, but can struggle with raw damage output and finding those actual full KOs when you're against sweatier or more coordinated lobbies. Again, with the melee characters, it just feels like you're making your own life harder by locking these characters. Now, if Spider-Man and Iron Fist find access to the backline or an isolated healer, yeah, you're gonna KO them for sure, but they just cannot match the reliability of the picks further up the list. Venom is a completely average dive tank, definitely has some great survivability and damage output, but his ult is far from the guaranteed team wipe that the better tanks bring. Bucky and Squirrel Girl, again, feel great if you're winning. They feel completely average if you're losing. Their ults just aren't going to turn an entire game around and wipe someone 100-0 though. They're more of like win harder buttons. All right, moving on to the A tier, these heroes are good to pick every single game. They bring lots to the table and are extremely reliable, if not some of the best in their class at what they do. So with Adam Warlock, this character can be a little tricky to learn, but once people learn to properly play him, he is an invaluable healer. The Soul Link can keep his team alive through big enemy ultimates. His Resurrect can completely change the game, giving your team a big do-over in overtime, and his damage is honestly nothing to scoff at. Now on to Luna, she is right up there neck and neck with being the best healer in the game alongside Mantis. Again, her ultimate is just an immortality field, and is just so insanely good at countering lots of DPS ults. Even some of the best duelist ults in the game, you just save Luna ult and dance through the pain, keeping your team's health bars at 100%. It is absolutely insane. Cloak and Dagger is a super well-designed support with lots of inherent usefulness with their auto-locked heals, but also some really high skill ceiling capabilities, such as Cloak's ability to turn his team invulnerable with his right click. So once you get to know the game pretty well and know when to use this ability, this is like a little miniature ultimate. Keeping your team alive through high burst ultimates is just nuts. Cloak and Dagger feels like that hero that autofilled players like to pick up because they also deal great damage and they're just super fun to play. Now Rocket can't quite match the healing output of Luna, but his mobility and survivability make him a great pick to give consistent heals just through staying alive longer than the other healers. His Resurrect Beacon gives someone on your team a do-over and you can scurry up walls and stay airborne, making him a much harder target for the divers, especially because he's got that small hitbox. And speaking of divers, let's talk about Thor and Captain America. Now there's a little bit of an asterisk on these characters being so high on the tier list, and that's because if you pick both of these characters together, they become an unstoppable force. These bruiser divey tanks are really only good if you have both of them and go all in with it. But when they're both in the enemy backline running around with massive health bars and solid damage, it can be nearly impossible to take out either one of them. So they work really well together, but if you're picking them separately, I would likely bump them down to B tier. And another tank with a bit of an asterisk is Penny Parker, who is fantastic on defense maps due to her trap mines essentially letting you build a home base that the enemy team has to push into. But she's much worse when playing on offense or on open control areas. Now tanks who are great at pushing offensively are going to be Doctor Strange and Groot. Both these tanks can really help your team move the cart, just gaining so much free ground with the walls and Doc's shield. And in fact, both of these characters are great in general across game modes with huge health bars, lots of utility, just really good tanks. Now, as for the duelists in A tier, they are just really easy and reliable characters. Moon Knight and Punisher feel like the standard go-to duelists. They fit into every comp on every map. You don't have to worry about them being useless or not landing their shots. It's just nice, reliable damage every game. They may not always find those game-winning picks, but if you just have these characters on your team, you're not going to lack damage, which is nice. Now, speaking of picks, we are 100% in a pick meta, and what I mean by that is the ability to take a full health enemy that is getting healed and wipe them out of the game in the blink of an eye. And nobody does that better than our two strongest duelists in the game, Hawkeye and Hela. There is so much healing in this game, it can be hard for any duelist to break through that healing. But that problem just straight up doesn't exist for these two snipers, which is why they're in the S tier. Hawkeye has the only true one shot in the game on his basic ability, and man, it is a game changer. Even if only 1 in 10 of your shots are finding that fully charged headshot, just taking a single hero out with basically no form of counterplay or giving them the chance to sustain through their damage makes this character invaluable. And Hela can't quite match that one-shot potential, but if you're just spamming shots into a team fight, you will eventually find a lucky double headshot which KOs almost just as fast. These two characters deal unreal levels of damage. They have great reliable ults, they have infinite range, they are just the absolute cream of the crop when it comes to playing Duelist and Marvel Rivals. Now, alongside these two in the S tier is Psylocke, who is considerably harder to play. There's lots of mechanics and spell discipline to learn, which is why I'm super excited to bring you guys my full Psylocke guide. She's been my main character to climb with. I love her so much, but she's definitely broken in her own way. She's a much riskier and difficult character to play, but her own one-shot combo, while riskier than the snipers, is just as effective at opening up the floodgates of a winning team fight. In a hero shooter game, creating that instant numbers advantage will result in just a steamrolled team fight almost every time. So it's no surprise that these three characters who are the best at finding that one pick are just the best in the game currently. Now up next is the S tier healer Mantis. She can match Luna's heals, she's insanely fast, her damage boost makes finding those picks on pick characters like Hawkeye and Hela even easier, and she's got a really easy AoE sleep ability to peel herself or even create picks with. Her ultimate doesn't last as long as Luna's ult, but it's just as effective at turning your team basically immortal for the duration. Mantis is just straight up the best healer in the game, and Magneto has all the positive traits that Groot and Doctor Strange does, but with much better offensive capabilities. This guy can not only create space for your team with a shield, he can also find picks himself, so he is definitely the S tier tank. And guys, that is going to wrap up our first official tier list for the launch of Marvel Rivals. Now again, this game is very young. I can't wait to see the first balance changes and how it's going to shift the meta. If you have any questions about my placements on this list or just want to hear more in-depth analysis, let me know in the comments and I will respond to as many of those comments as I can. But with that being said, go forth and just play your favorite heroes. Remember, this is a video game, it's not your job. Unless you're trying to reach the absolute highest ranks in the game, you really can make any character work. This tier list is just here to make your climb a little easier and to help you understand where the state of the game is currently. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any future tier list, and I will see you in the next one, Rivalers.